When 76 veterans died in a COVID outbreak at the Holyoke Soldiers Home nearly 2 years ago, the Baker administration vowed swift action to get to the bottom of what went wrong and to make sure nothing like that ever happened again. The Attorney General's office also launched an investigation, ultimately filed criminal charges against the then Superintendent Bennett Walsh and then Medical Director Dr. David Clinton, which have since been dismissed, but the AG's office is appealing. A report from an outside attorney selected by the governor's office also detailed numerous decisions by Walsh that were, quote, utterly baffling from an infection control perspective, including consolidating units, little to no distancing between symptomatic and asymptomatic residents, a failure to quickly isolate suspected COVID patients, testing delays, and more. And several lawsuits have been filed, including one in federal court on behalf of dozens of workers at the home, claiming inhumane conditions caused by management's poor decision-making, and another class action suit that named State Health Secretary Mary Lou Sudders as a defendant, claiming she long ignored serious leadership problems at the Soldiers Home. But now we're learning the problems may have continued even longer than many had thought. As the Boston Globe's Andrea Estes first reported last week, a top official who was brought in after the deaths to identify and fix issues at the Holyoke Soldiers Home, Eric Sheehan, says he was fired just days after flagging ongoing concerns with the State Inspector General's office. And he's not the only one. Beth Scheffler, who Sheehan recruited as acting chief nursing officer at the Soldiers Home in Chelsea, says she too was fired shortly after filing a complaint with the IG's office. Now they've both filed a joint whistleblower complaint with the Attorney General. Eric Sheehan and Beth Scheffler join me now, along with their attorney, Andrew Couture. We've also reached out to the Inspector General's office, which has not responded as of this taping, and the AG's office, which referred us to the Office of Health and Human Services, which sent us a transcript of Governor Baker's appearance with Marjorie Egan and me on Boston Public Radio, which we'll hear a piece of in a few minutes. Eric, Beth, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Eric, starting with you, when you took over at Holyoke, what conditions did you see that troubled you?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having us
Sure.
again. Back in December of 2020, I was asked by the administration to be the assistant secretary with the oversight of both homes. And I identified pretty quickly that there was a number of health and safety concerns that I was identifying.
Like what?
So many of them were around the CMS requirements for infection control and how patient movement would work within a long-term care facility. More specifically, for example, when a patient came back from an outpatient hospital or an appointment outside of the facility.
And you believe they posed health risks to the patients. Is that a fair statement?
Significant health risks. Our responsibility was to ensure we were following CMS and CDC and DPH guidelines for a reason, because health experts had identified those protocols as extremely important to follow to reduce spread.
Eric, could you report those concerns to?
Originally, I had made sure I had made the Holyoke administration aware with my findings. When it seemed like nothing was being done, I had notified my boss, who was Secretary Cheryl Poppy, and for the most part, my concerns were ignored. And then in the spring of 2021, I had sent them up to Mary Lou Sudders, who's the secretary for the executive office.
What response did you get from Mary Lou Sudders?
I did not get a response back from Mary Lou Sudders at all.
What response did you get from the Secretary of Veterans Services, Poppy?
Essentially, I was told that the superintendents do not report to me. It's not my responsibility, and that I should continue to work with them if there is any issues, in which I had reiterated a number of health and safety concerns.
Eric, one last thing for now. You took a medical leave, I believe, in the midst of your service there. Why?
So, yes, I was diagnosed last spring with post-traumatic stress disorder and severe depression from the long year of running the Chelsea Soldiers Home, where I was the deputy superintendent and acting superintendent, and finally took its toll after working 15, 20-hour days for about 11 months and being on site. So as a veteran myself, seeing fellow veterans die was traumatic for me and finally caught up to me.
Beth, you experienced some conditions that made you uncomfortable as well. What were they?
Yes. Well, I myself never went over personally to the Holyoke facility, but what I can tell you is that in the summer of 2021, after everyone was being told that the Holyoke facility was following CMS, CDC, and DPH guidelines for in response to the pandemic to try and prevent the spread of COVID-19, I attended meetings by Zoom where the Holyoke leadership, representatives from the Department of Veteran Services, the Chief of Staff, their attorneys, and senior leadership, the medical director, senior leadership at Chelsea. And the nature of that call, that whole meeting was about trying to comparing what Chelsea was doing to Holyoke, because we were hyper vigilant about updating our policies and procedures and re-educating staff, et cetera, throughout the pandemic. And what was glaring was that Holyoke, even in late June or early July of 2021, hadn't implemented basic procedures consistent with CDC, CMS, or DPH guidelines. They would discuss, those included how to manage visitors, how to manage personal protective equipment, how to manage testing of residents and staff, how to cohort and isolate. Those things at that level, I mean, we're talking, 18 months after the pandemic starts, 15 months after the pandemic starts, and all those deaths, they were still trying to iron that out.
Beth, what kind of reaction on those Zoom calls was given by the officials to whom these conditions were being reported?
Well, initially, I will be honest with you, initially I misunderstood and thought that they were trying, that Chelsea was being asked to do something different than what we had been doing, and had been quite successful. But what the lawyer for the Department of Veteran Services piped in and said, actually, we're trying to get Holyoke to be in alignment with Chelsea. That was the reaction, because I got rather concerned and heated, I'll just be honest with you, during that call. It concerned me that 15 months later, we're still having these conversations.
Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but your clients ended up filing whistleblower claims with the Inspector General's office because they weren't getting satisfaction in response to their concerns. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, Jim.
And they believe that as a result of the filing of those whistleblower claims, they were fired shortly thereafter. Is that correct as well?
It seemed to be the case as after the initial interviews with the Inspector General. In fact, I believe Beth was fired a day or two after, or maybe even the same day.
The day
of her concluding her IG's interview, and Eric was maybe about a week after his Inspector General.
Andrew, I want to play for you. We asked, as I mentioned a minute ago, and this was the transcript of this was sent to us by the Executive Office of Human Services. Governor Baker was with us on the radio last week, and Marjorie Egan and I asked him about the whistleblower claims and if he knew anything about them prior to the story in the Boston Globe. Here's what the governor had to say.
First I heard of it was when I saw the story. And there is a process for fact-finding on these allegations, which we will collaborate and cooperate with. And the Holyoke story is one that I'm sure the people involved in that will never go over, and neither will I.
He went on to say that the governor went on to say that he reached out to roughly 100 family members, spoke to about 80, and that he believed he took remedial action immediately. Andrew, do you have any evidence that the governor, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Sutters, or the Secretary of Veterans Services, Poppy, actually knew about the filing of these Inspector General claims, or is it the coincidence in time that caused you to reach that conclusion?
It is definitely the coincidence in time. There's no direct evidence, but to see Beth fired the day of the concluding of her Inspector General interview, there's a lot to be said on that one, especially Eric as well. He was on FMLA, family and medical leave. Yeah. So he was on FMLA status when he got a call, and they fired him while under FMLA status, which is a violation of that statute as well. And when you start talking about, whether or not, Governor Baker knew or who knew about it was either what they should have known. They should have known the problems. Instead, they ignored the problems and even reported during the height of COVID, we got this all under control, but in reality, they really didn't.
I want to get back to you, Eric, for a second. The Secretary of Veterans Services, when firing you, said, this was in the Globe, lost confidence in your ability. Your poor judgment had been discussed with you. Had it been discussed with you? What were your prior reviews like?
Never was discussed with me. In fact, my latest review, which was either February or March of 2021, I can't remember exactly when I received it. My review was exceptional. And when I went out on FMLA, my boss, Cheryl Poppy, never once called me or had any conversations with me. So there was never, ever a conversation. We've never had those conversations other than the fact I continued to do a stellar job for the homes and my expertise was valued.
Beth, had you had any prior problems in terms of your performance reviews prior to this fire?
No, sir. I had almost more than 2 decades of public service for the Commonwealth, and I actually won accommodations and awards during my tenure as a public health employee. Department of Public Health employee. I have never had a poor evaluation. My evaluations have been exceptional. I've never received a warning. I've never been put on a performance improvement plan. In fact, no one at Chelsea even told me there was a concern or issue at all until the Monday I went in and they said they no longer wanted me there.
Well, Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, I also think I read in the Globe account that you'd been asked to become the permanent chief nursing officer. Is that not correct?
They couldn't technically offer it to me officially until the person who was occupying the space, the position, who had been out on leave for a long time, officially vacated it. But I was told repeatedly that the intent was to have me transition into that role permanently, and that occurred just days before. I heard that from the Chelsea Soldiers Home attorney and the medical director, who had a conversation with the superintendent, and I had a conversation with the superintendent.
Understood.
There never was any indication that there would be a concern.
Eric, last thing from me for you. I know you're not a mind reader, but why would the administration, from Baker to Sutters to Poppy, why would they not want to fix the things that you identified as problems at the home, particularly after 76 veterans lost their lives there?
I think, Jim, that's the big question that we all need answered. As a veteran myself, it's deplorable. I always had a responsibility since the day I took an oath in 1998 going to Paris Island that I'd always take care of my fellow brethren, and that goes to today. So I don't know. And I put my heart and soul into my job, and I continue to do it until that they did not want my services.
Andrew Couture, I only have a couple of seconds left. What are you looking for? What's the relief that your clients are seeking in these whistleblower claims?
Well, my clients are seeking, first of all, specific performance. We want to see the Soldiers Home get to where they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. First off, that's primary. I mean, this is not just for Eric or for Beth. This is to fix a problem within the Soldiers' Homes, both in Chelsea and in Holyoke.
What else?
We are seeking, compensation for time that both of them lost. In addition, I think it's important to note that Eric also has a workers' comp claim currently pending against the Commonwealth due to the issues that arose during his service to the Commonwealth, and of course the Commonwealth has completely ignored any kind of request for any kind of workers' comp benefit.
Before you go, I said Eric was the last question, but talking to Andrew, it just occurred to me, I know you're not at the home anymore. Do you have any reason to believe that the conditions that concern you continue to exist, or do you not know?
So to answer your question, yes. I have a lot of former staff members and colleagues that trust me to this day and still reach out to tell me that things are still pretty bad at both homes.
Eric Sheehan, Beth Scheffler, Andrew Couture, thank you all three for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.